Duality, that's
Duality,
the word.
yeah. Literature podcast, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when those twins fucked that girl in an incestuous three-way and then killed her and buried her in the pig pen?
Now, is it still incest if your dicks don't touch?
Well,
That's a bad joke, I'm sorry.
This podcast is not suitable for children or those who are easily disturbed. Spoiler warning for whatever is in the title of this episode.
And now for the obligatory socials. Please like, share and subscribe. Follow Daniel at DStarSick on Twitter. Follow Ryan at Darth Damio on the Bluebird app. You can find the podcast on Twitter at HorrorPod69. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Slasher and Goodreads. Become part of the Disturbed community by asking for the Facebook group and Discord links. Send dick pics to the Horror of Babylon podcast at gmail.com. Support the show at patreon.com/the Horror of Babylon. In closing, you can let your friends know that The Horror of Babylon is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible and all other major podcast apps.
welcome to episode 48 of the Horror of Babylon, where we are discussing The Bone Farm by Dean Koontz. I am Ryan, and with me as always is Daniel. Say hi, Daniel.
Mama Day Day.
Mama Day Day. Okay, so we have covered Dean Koontz before, but that was way back in like episode 8.
Yeah, it was pretty early.
Yeah, and like 40 episodes ago. So how about just a short rehashing of your history with the Koontzster?
I started reading one of his books in high school, and then I didn't. And then my ex-wife made me read one of his books, and I really liked it. And then I was like looking up books that are similar to other books, and one of the things that keeps popping up are some of his books, like Phantoms was supposedly a lot like Stephen King's It, even more than I thought it was going to be. So I ended up reading that.
Which we did a whole episode comparing those two books that you can check out in our backlog.
Yeah. I actually think it's one of our better episodes.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Now I've read this.
Yes. In preparation, we knew Phantoms was going to be something we were going to cover on this podcast. So I read a couple of his other books, Dark Fall and The Takers. And I didn't love or hate either of them. They were both kind of middle-ish. But I liked Phantoms quite a bit, with a couple asterisks. And then I like this book quite a bit. I read this one last year, I think. And I thought it was fun and kind of pulpy and just like a good read. And then I read it again for this episode, and I have to confess that I think my opinion of it grew a little bit. I think there's a little more intelligence and a little more depth behind this book than I gave it consideration of on my first read-through.
It did kind of remind me of old pulp detective novels, because I've read a few of those too.
It is definitely pulpy. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying there's a little more intelligence behind it than I initially gave it credit for.
The vampire's a pure myth, superstition. I may be able to bring you proof that the superstition of yesterday can become the scientific reality of today.
Okay, so this book, The Bone Farm, was published in April of 2018. It's an audio original novella, meaning, as far as I know, this hasn't changed, but there wasn't originally a paperback or hardcover version of it. It's just an audiobook available on Audible, and if you have an Audible membership, you can listen to this one for free. Now, it is a prequel to the Jane Hawk series, which is one of Dean Koontz's novel series. There are 6 books in total, 5 novels and the one prequel novella, The Bone Farm. And I wasn't initially going to run through all these, but I was looking at the publishing order for these, and he put these things out so fast. I just wanted to... So the first book, number 1 in the series, The Silent Corner, was published in June 2017. And then 5 months later, novel 2, The Whispering Room, comes out in November 2017. The prequel novella comes out 6 months later in April 2018. 1 month later, book 3, The Crooked Staircase, comes out. And then 4 months after that, book 4, The Forbidden Door, comes out. And then the next year, so this one, there's a little more time in between, but May 2019, the 5th and final Jane and Hawk book, well, 6th book if you count the novella, The Night Window, comes out. And I tried to look up if he had written these all years ago and then just kind of decided to publish them all with a few months in between, or if he was actually writing them in between, because it seems absurdly fast.
That's a lot of books. Is Dean Koontz on cocaine?
Maybe. And the other ones, I looked up, the other ones are all regular sized novels. They're not super long, but they're a normal sized book as opposed to The Bone Farm.
Huh.
And all I could find out was this quote on his Facebook page where he said, "I took no break in between Jane Hawk number 2 and number 3 because I had to know what happened next. The premise of this series scares the bejesus out of me." And he said that on Facebook in 2020.
That sounds like something Dean Koontz would say.
Yeah.
I have to know how my book ends. Where Stephen King is more like, how am I going to end this thing?
If this were Stephen King, I would have said that he wrote all of these books in high school and they were sitting in his attic and he just handed them to his publisher and he's like, yeah, give him 3 months in between.
Oh, I would have said it was on a cocaine binge.
Or that.
I don't even remember writing numbers 3 and 4. People insist that they were okay.
Yeah. Just to mention some of the other series, because he has a lot of books, but he has written multiple series, so Odd Thomas and Frankenstein are 2 other series of his. Okay, now jumping into structure and themes, I want to talk about genre, because The Bone Farm, it's not a traditional horror book.
Yeah.
It's more of a fictional crime thriller, but it's very horrific.
It reminds me of Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, which are things that are definitely considered horror.
Yeah.
And I think that this book can fall under the horror umbrella, but it's not your traditional horror novel.
I'm in a bunch of Facebook horror groups, and people talk about elevated horror a lot, and how it's just what people who are too ashamed to say they like horror will call it when they like a horror movie. And people are like, we used to just call those thrillers.
Yeah.
So, thriller to me has always been at least horror adjacent.
Yeah. And this has some pretty scary stuff in it, honestly. Not goblins jumping out of the closet, but
yeah,
girls getting kidnapped by guys on the side of the road. Pretty scary.
Yeah.
And going into the structure, this book actually has a pretty unique structure, at least in terms of the 4 Dean Koontz books that I've read. It's from 2 perspectives. The present story is a frame narrative for the majority of the book, which is our journal entries, but the present story is from Jane, the so-called main character's perspective, in which she's investigating the kidnapping and murder of 22 women, I believe.
Yeah.
And then the past is a series of journal entries from one of the 2 killers' perspectives, in which
he refers to himself in the 3rd person,
which is kind of just scary in and of itself. But he explains his origin, his background, and then his eventual descent into these crimes and how they committed the crimes and how they carried them out and such, and then eventually we end up in the frame narrative, which is in the present day, and Jane faces off with the killer, and the whole thing is resolved.
I'm going to start making my journal entries like this. Daniel went over to record with Ryan tonight. He wore 2 watches.
He had an incestuous 3-way with Ryan.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Nope. So you've read more Dean Koontz than I have. All the 3 other Dean Koontz books I've read are always just either an omniscient narrator or jumping back and forth between different characters' perspectives, but they were all chronological and nothing very unique in terms of structure. So this book jumped out at me because of how it's structured. What were your thoughts?
It was unique. And you know me, I'm a sucker.
I'm a sucker.
Use my big boy words. I'm a sucker for anything that's a journal entry format. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of cool. I liked the jumping back and forth, and that I think that actually helped build some tension, because everything in like the present time takes place in the span of like an hour.
Yeah,
if that.
Yeah,
and so you're jumping back and learning more about this dude, and it's making you more freaked out about what's going on in the present.
Yeah.
I actually thought that was kind of clever. I thought that was a really clever way to build tension.
And the audiobook has two different narrators. I'm sorry I don't have their names, but a woman narrates the present from Jane's perspective, and a man narrates the journal entries from the past from the killer Mercer's perspective. So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Especially, like, I enjoy Dean Koontz, but some of the things that I don't like are that I don't want to say like normalcy. Like, I feel like just taking Phantoms as an example, there's nothing like really, there's no risks taken in the structure. It's just very straightforward, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
But I appreciate when something different is done.
Yeah, it is nice whenever there's a risk or reward when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about this with it, where it might confuse a Joe Blow reader.
Yeah.
At first, I don't think this would though.
No.
I think that this is actually kind of a nice middle ground.
Yeah, this is very easy to follow
because it establishes these are the journal entries.
Yeah, it says it explicitly.
Yeah. So,
and I feel like even though those are journal entries from a character's perspective, they could even not be true. They could be an unreliable narrator and are happening in the past, aren't the quote unquote main story. I feel like that was the actual story, and everything happening in the present is really just there to kind of
wrap things up.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, that's the more interesting part of the book. Themes. Got a lot of themes, and a lot of them jump out as Daniel-friendly themes to me. 4
out of these 5 are themes that are in my book, so.
Yeah.
Serial killers. That's a big one. And this really... you've never read Mindhunter, have you? Or seen the show? Mindhunter is a book written by Johnny Douglas. He is an FBI agent. He's the one who helped coin the phrase serial killer. And they made a TV show that kind of dramatizes that entire experience. And this reminded me a lot of that, especially how Jane talks to Mercer. Like, just noticing these small little quirks he does and getting him to talk more about it.
He won't stop stirring his coffee. He won't take a sip of it.
And it honestly reminded me of just some of the accounts, be they true or not, that Johnny Douglas wrote about. It's also kind of super Dean Koontsy. He always has his bad guys be almost just outright sociopaths.
Yeah.
He wants you to know who the bad guys are.
Yeah, they're very black and white.
Yeah, I think Mercer might have been his most complex one.
Yeah.
That I've read anyway.
We'll talk more about it when we get into characters, but Mercer is a really good example of one of our favorite phrases on this podcast, which is we're not excusing, we're just explaining.
We're just explaining how we got to this point.
Yeah, because there's no excuse for the things that Mercer does, but the book does a good job explaining why he does what he does.
Yeah. Twins is another big one. First of all, there's twin characters, but then you got the 2 watches, and then you got times running in opposite directions. Kind of shows you the different pathways that both of these twins took until they ultimately converge on the same time.
You have 2 storylines in 2 different time periods
bouncing back and forth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of 2s in this. A lot of duality. That's
duality.
The word.
Yeah. Literature podcast. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when those twins fucked that girl in an incestuous 3-way and then killed her and buried her in the pig pen?
Now, is it still incest if your dicks don't touch?
Well,
that's a bad joke. I'm sorry.
And it's more than just the 2 of them.
Yeah.
because they also kidnap his niece and assuming have sex with her. Now, granted, she's not his biological niece, but he was raised to believe she was his niece.
And his adoptive mother handled him hitting puberty in the worst possible way.
Okay, we're jumping at the bit to get onto characters. So, okay, psychosexuality.
What I just said.
Yeah, I did not mean to pair this with Hellraiser.
It comes out pretty
It
good.
worked out really well. That was just a really happy coincidence.
This is just the Frank who didn't travel all that much, I guess.
Yeah, this is the repressed version of Frank, who didn't get to go out in the world and live all those fantasies, who was told to stay in his room and masturbate.
So he got to explode all at once.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't go well.
Yeah. Power and consent sort of goes along with serial killers, especially with how a lot of them operate. I've probably read entirely too much true crime for my own good. It's honestly kind of a genre I've come to despise these past few years. It's the same thing with something like, rape's also in this book.
Yeah.
Power dynamics, the needing to feel in control, and why do they feel out of control? It's usually an external thing. Like, I didn't get to control my relationship with my mother, and now I'm controlling my relationship with every other woman.
Yeah.
Usually a little bit more complex than that in real life, but when it comes to fiction, this is usually how you whittle it down.
And this is
bite size.
This is a very short novella.
Yeah.
Even for a novella, it's pretty short. So there's not a lot of jerking around in this. A
lot of jerking off, though.
A lot of jerking off, not a lot of jerking around. And then environment versus genetics. So you have a psych degree, I have an education degree. Something that both of us would have talked about in college was what determines who you are as a person. Is it the environment you're raised in, or the genetics, your DNA that you have, or some manner of both, or is it a mysterious fourth option? And you get to see that with the two twins, Mercer and Jack, who are raised by different parents in completely different environments. Kind of sort of turn out to be the same person, but not initially upon meeting each other, but once they...
It doesn't take a lot. It takes a little push.
Yeah.
Jack Palpatine. Mercer. You could not learn this from an FBI agent.
Yeah, Mercer's Vader, and Jack is Palpatine. I like it.
Is it possible to learn to fuck these bitches? Not from your movies.
What was the line where he's like, your mom turned you into a jerk-off artist and you were afraid to talk to real women?
It was something like that.
Yeah.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into characters. So we'll start with Jane, who is the main character of the series. And I guess you could call her... It's hard for me to call her the protagonist of this book. She's more like the featured character of the frame narrative. But regardless, what are your thoughts on Jane Hawk?
She's serviceable, but she's also very much a Dean Koontz character.
I like you said, I liked how observant she was. Mm-hmm. I liked all the things she was picking up on, how she was very cautious, how she's not like, let's kick in the door and pull out our guns and let's go in there blazing. She's very intelligent in the way she goes about things.
This is how he writes a lot of FBI agents, or sheriffs, and I'm just now starting to realize like how often he uses those as like main characters.
Yeah. Bryce from Phantoms. Two main characters from Darkfall are both cops.
And you haven't read Midnight, but the main character in that is a FBI agent who goes to investigate this weird happening.
Yeah.
He handles things kind of at this sort of slow and steady pace until shit starts hitting the fan and he has to react.
She reminds me a little bit of Jennifer from Phantoms and her, like, methodicalness.
Except she gets to do things.
Yeah, exactly. She gets to kind of be the hero and, have her actions have effect on the plot.
If I could travel back in time, the one thing I would tell Dean Koontz is, hey, just make her a scientist.
Yeah.
And then she'll get to do something at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Have her come up with the way you beat the
instead of a small town doctor, she's like studying an algae or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But hindsight's 20/20, and Dean Koontz is a millionaire, and I am not.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't realize this until after I had read this the second time and was doing some research on the other Jane Hawk books, because I haven't read any of them.
Yeah, I probably will now.
Yeah,
so.
I think I will as well. But apparently the premise of the actual series is that she's a rogue FBI agent who is on the run from the FBI and becomes the nation's most wanted fugitive.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that sounds nice.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested. And I'm wondering if, like, in those books, she talks about her partner who got killed on that case that one time and how it changed her outlook on the force, or I don't know.
We already know it now. So.
Yeah, exactly. Chronologically, this book is first. It was the third one published, as we established earlier. But yeah, I'm interested to read more.
I also think Hawk is just a good last name when you're like writing.
Super sweet.
Yeah, and like, Jane paired with it rolls off the tongue. Super.
Jane Hawk.
Agent Jane Hawk.
Yeah.
It's like having like a last name be like Wolf or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, that's such a badass.
Yeah. So like, she's not really the star of this book for me, but I'm interested.
Yeah.
Okay, so next character is Mercer, who is really more the protagonist of the book, because you spend more time in his journal entries and the flashbacks, and like I said earlier, to me that's the more interesting part of the book.
I ran for politics to fix Mama's property taxes. It was something like that.
Yeah, so if you haven't read it, one, get an Audible account and read it, even if just for a month.
And Audible, sponsor us.
Yeah, Audible, please. You sponsor every other podcast I listen to. This guy was raised by an abusive dad. I would say both his parents were abusive, but
just in different ways.
Yeah, his dad was physically, emotionally abusive, and his mom coddled him to an abusive amount, and
fucked him up sexually.
She had no. There were no barriers, no secrets between him and her. From the time he was a young child, she would tell him the sexual things that his father would do to her. And they always slept in the same bed. When he turned 11, I think, she started buying him pornography so that he would never need a real woman.
Yeah. Who's the actor who played Psycho in the original Psycho movie? Do you know off the top of your head?
My brain went Norman Bates, but that's the character.
Yeah. The speech he gives in that movie when he's talking about his mother, it just, this whole book gave me kind of Norman Bates vibes.
No, I was picturing Norman Bates in my head for Mercer the whole time.
But specifically this actor and his like little speech that he gives.
Anthony Perkins.
Oh, and they're so polite.
Yes.
And just the way he talks, I love him.
And I can't imagine that Dean Koontz didn't have Psycho in mind when he was writing.
I guarantee it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No. It's a good homage.
Yeah. I think it was a very good homage.
But basically, this kid gets real fucked up by his parents. His dad dies when he's relatively young, and he and his mom just get to continue in this sick, codependent relationship they have. The only thing that he gets to do in his own life is he gets to go off to college and then become a politician to fix some property tax stuff for his mom and her financial portfolio, and then he quits politics and he moves back in with her, lives with her until he's 39, at which point she dies, and then his whole life kind of falls apart. Fast forward a little bit, he meets his twin brother that he never knew about. He finds out that his parents weren't actually his parents, they were his adoptive parents.
There was a second Mercer looking at Mercer.
And it sends him over the edge. He starts trying to copy his brother. They start kidnapping and raping and enslaving women. They keep them for so much amount of time. They decide that they want to punish their mothers, so they would send the mothers of the women they kidnapped nude pictures of these women tied up. And then a few months later, they would send them a picture of that woman again dead. And then they would bury them in the pigsty.
The thing that I thought was kind of, I don't know if I'd call it clever, but it was interesting to me, is that Mercer, throughout this book, is almost consistently manipulated using sex.
Yeah.
From his mother doing it, to Jack doing it. He sends his girlfriend in and says, "Oh, I think my brother needs this."
Yep.
And then he convinces him, "Oh, hey, we can just murder a bunch of bitches and you can take what you want. You'd enjoy it."
In the descriptions of what they do to these women and the murders, there's some pretty not nice things. I was looking at the Goodreads page and reading some of the reviews that people left, and there was a negative review that I took a quote from that I want to share with you guys.
Okay, I want to hear this.
So this is from a Goodreads user. I think one of my this was a long review, and she started this out by saying, "I've read so many Dean Koontz books, I love all his books, but I didn't like this one." And then, "I think one of my biggest issues with the story was the amount of time we spend inside the killer's head. His thoughts were creepy and disturbing, and I really didn't want to hear so many of them." And
God, that's the reason I like this so
exactly.
much.
Now, I wouldn't fault anybody for not liking it for that reason, but that's exactly why I like it, because I like that it's like a deep dive into just this one character and how fucked up his life was, how fucked up his parents was, and ultimately how fucked up it makes him.
Yeah, no, I'm there. I agree.
But I don't think it's a quality of writing thing. You either are going to enjoy that or you're not. And if somebody else went, "Oh, that book is icky," like I wouldn't disagree with them.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's icky. But as opposed to something,
I promise I don't have these exact thoughts all the time.
but as opposed to something like the Confederado, where all the bad things that happen in that book are basically for shock value. There's like some actual things being said.
There's themes. It builds on the character. Mm-hmm. The bad guys are punished. I guess the Confederado was punished right at the end.
Yeah, but
you got to see like this conflict build. There was no conflict with the Confederado. He just was this dude.
So Jack is Mercer, but instead of having this sheltered, abusive life, he's raised by the pimp and real mother before he goes into foster care and leaves foster care at 17 and then is on his own for the rest of his life. And he's basically like the unfiltered version of... Mercer is the Jedi who like represses and retains all of his emotions, and Jack is the Sith that just lets it all out.
I was gonna say the ego and the id, but
yeah, that's probably a little more intelligent, but
I like yours better.
Yeah.
We literally started this off by making a bunch of Palpatine Anakin references, so
you could assume that without Jack ever showing up, Mercer would have just lived his life on that farm until he died.
Yeah, he would have been jerking off to his movies.
Yeah, just drinking whiskey and jerking off to his movies until...
occasionally saying hi to his niece.
Yeah, which... we'll get to her. We'll get to that. Okay, so Jack... another big thing about Jack is that he learned voodoo magic from a voodoo witch woman named Mama Dede in New Orleans. And Daniel has not seen The Princess and the Frog, so I'm going to show him the picture in my head for Mama Dede that I had.
Mama Dede told him if he wear 2 watches, he will live forever.
Princess and the Frog.
Voodoo witch woman.
This is what I was picturing.
It's probably less problematic than what I told you I was picturing. So, if
you would have told me that Dean Koontz let Stephen King write a character for him,
it would have been Mom and Dede. I bet you they were sitting in a room together, and King came up with Mom and Dede, and Koontz is just like, "I need you to take out all these N-bombs." Jack would use the N-bomb. I don't want him to.
Jack would, but I'm just going to leave it out of the book, okay, Steve? No, do it. Do it now.
Have some balls.
Do it.
I love you, Stephen King, but I'm still thinking about The Stand.
Yeah, I'm traumatized from all the N-bombs and the R words and the... Yeah. So one of the spells that Jack learns from Mama Dede is how to live forever, which is to wear 2 wristwatches, one telling regular time and one running backwards, and that would create a bubble in time that would keep you alive for at least 100 years, if not forever, is how it's phrased in the book.
I will cover this pig-shaped grave in voodoo magic so her spirit don't haunt us.
When Jack and Mercer meet, Jack moves in with Mercer, and Mercer's adoptive mother had a large collection of clocks, so there's clocks all over the house.
They start setting them all up.
They rewire half of them so that they run backwards, so that they can create like their own kingdom outside of time where they can live as kings forever.
I think my favorite thing about both Jack and Mercer is just how much they believed it. Like, I think Mercer at first wasn't on board, but then the more they were getting away with it, he was like, huh.
Yeah.
Maybe this voodoo priest magic is real.
To the point where at the final showdown with Jane, where he's completely convinced that Jack isn't dead, even though Jane just shot Jack through the heart.
Yeah.
Like, mercilessly. Pew, pew, pew. Pew, pew.
America.
Real quick, circle back on Jane. What did you think of the conversation that Jane has with her partner in the car on the way to the farm about murdering people, or shooting people, killing people in the line of duty, and where her partner is an expecting father, and he's worried about how his kid is going to view him if he has to kill people as an agent?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what she said. It was something like, better than you not coming back, or something like that.
Yeah.
Jane was very much more pro shooting the bad guys.
Yeah, and it's a complicated issue. I'm not going to say one way or the other that anybody's right or wrong on that, because obviously cops shooting people is a very controversial topic.
Right, tell me your hot take on police shootings.
No. But basically, her partner is questioning. He said, before I became a father, I had no issue with shooting the bad guys, and now that I'm about to have a little girl, I'm wondering like how she's going to view her father when she grows up and learns that I may have killed people doing my job. And Jane's like, she's an FBI kid. She's going to be okay with it if you need to kill somebody to make sure you go home, or to stop somebody else from being hurt, then you do it. And she's very like absolute about it.
Which she practices what she preaches.
Yeah, she does. And then it comes to the point where they get ambushed and her partner is slain through no real fault of his own. He's the one who gets surprised and is killed for it.
And Jack empties his clip into him.
Yeah.
Which Jane even says that if he would have been focused, he could have just like taken both of them out.
Yeah, if he just would have shot the partner and then shot Jane.
Yeah,
like
double tap.
Yeah, 2 and 2, instead of just being a madman and emptying your clip into the first guy. Yeah. Which leads to this like dog soldier chase through the house, where eventually Jane gets the better of Jack and gets to put one shot straight through his heart.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Which then eventually leads to Mercer finding his body, going mad, not believing he's dead, and then running to the cellar, which is where they keep their victims. And we haven't even talked about the latest victim, who's also his niece. But it ends in the standoff where she's like, Jack is dead. And Mercer's like, no, Jack can't be dead. We have a magic spell in this place so that neither of us can die. And he's totally
He
convinced.
was wearing his watches.
He was wearing his watches. You can't be pregnant. I had a condom on. It's impossible.
My recent pregnancy scare, everyone was like, Daniel, did you wear a condom? I was like, was I supposed to?
Never.
Kill you all! I'll drive you crazy and I'll kill you all! I'm every nightmare you ever had. I am your worst dream come true. I'm everything you ever were afraid of.
Scary shit. Is it scary?
If serial killers scare you, this was a very Hollywood serial killer-y. With like the sending, like I'm not saying that there's been no serial killers that send letters.
Yeah.
But those tend to be more rare.
Yeah.
That's very Zodiac. That's very BTK. So that kind of gets under my skin because I have seen those crime scene photos. Mm-hmm. So I know what the end result of serial killers looks like, and it's not great.
It's really not Hollywood and happens a lot and is happening more. is abduction of young women.
Yeah.
That aspect of the book scares the hell out of me.
I'm sure it does.
Somebody with a young daughter and like, that's terrifying to me. Is more likely to happen in real life is, that they would be sold as into the sex trade and lots of bad things, more so than this fantasy story on a pig farm. But that's not necessarily better.
Yeah. You're not wrong. That got dark.
Yeah, it did. I'm gonna clean that up a little bit. Scary shit got a little too scary.
It got too real.
Too real. I think it's scary, but it's scary for reminding me of real life, which is honestly, to me, that's always the scariest parts of any book. Like, the scariest part of Pet Sematary is Gage running out in the road and getting hit by a car.
That book, I still think that's the scariest Stephen King book.
I completely agree. It's the scariest thing. It's the scariest thing I've ever read. We should probably edit our season 2 schedule to fit in Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
Kiss me, fat boy.
Okay, so Kiss Me, Fat Boy. Is it Wincest? Or is it just incest?
If we're picturing him as the dude who played Norman Bates, then I would say it's Wincest.
Yeah.
If we're picturing him as the how Norman Bates looks in the novel, then it's just incest.
I've not read Psycho. I want to.
He is a fat, balding man with a beard.
I think that fits the character a little more. Not saying that good-looking people can't go crazy.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sex in this book.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of it's super. Well, how did he refer to that woman's periods? The moody blues.
Yeah, it was the moody blues.
The moody blues. So I thought that was the funniest shit. Spoiler alert, I was listening to this book at work in the middle of doing like my actual job, and I just start laughing. I'm cackling because I'm like trying to hide my headset because I'm like listening to it in one ear, and somebody looks at me like, Daniel, what's so funny? I'm like, oh, it's nothing. I have my hand over my ear. Nothing, I just got moody blues is all I got.
So the first woman that Jack and Mercer kill, Jack actually brings with him when he goes to meet Mercer and moves in, and it's portrayed as that it's a consensual thing, but it also kind of makes it seem like that Jack is buying her and feeding her drugs. Mm-hmm. But regardless of that, like, she doesn't like try to leave. She stays. They like have fun. She cooks for them. They watch movies.
I love that Mercer's like, it was different with her.
Yeah.
She would cook and hang out with us and stuff. That's when you kind of see, like, he just kind of wanted a relationship.
Yeah, but he doesn't have any healthy relationships.
Yeah.
The closest thing he has to a healthy relationship is with his niece, which you see how that ends up. So compare and contrast the first girlfriend and the niece. So one thing that Mercer and Jack both really like about her is, like, she's almost always down for sex. Mm-hmm. She, like, almost never says no or later. What he calls it the moody blues whenever she says no. And how she eventually ends up getting killed is she has ribbed Jack too many times and then tells him no for sex.
Jack just beats her to death.
Literally beats her to death. And goads Mercer into participating. And after, like, that first kick, right, so Mercer kicks her, and there's this really disturbing description of how the first time that Mercer kicked this woman while she was on the ground, he became nauseous. But the nausea went away within 10 seconds. And then he felt the power that he held over this woman, and it's just like, ugh. Blech.
I don't know how much of this was intentional. And again, this is generalizing quite a lot. I'm going to reference like Johnny Douglas again with serial killer patterns. And this isn't, again, universally true. But with serial killers, sometimes you'll see this thing where the first kill happens super close to their house or super close to where they live. Mm-hmm. And then for a while, they all start happening like super far away. because they don't want to be associated with the killings.
Which is what they do here.
But as time goes on, it circles down almost like a spiral back closer to their home.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're getting lazier, more confident, any number of things. And that's how a number of serial killers have gotten caught, is they've just gotten lazy.
This specifically, it takes place on a farm in Pennsylvania. And their initial rule is they only kidnap women not in Pennsylvania. It's like Ohio, New Jersey, New York, West Virginia. But that eventually they take Mercer's niece, who obviously lives in Pennsylvania, lives in the same town, and which, because she's taken, it leads the FBI to go and question Mercer because he's her uncle and they're looking for this girl.
Mm-hmm.
Mercer gives away with a bunch of tells that he's hiding something, which leads Jack to panic, come out and kill Jane's partner, and so on and so forth.
I'm gonna stir this coffee. My mama always liked it cold.
Okay, so his niece, there's just a little bit of a background story that when she was in high school, she was kind of starting to hang out with a bad crowd, and spending time with Mercer and Mercer's mother kind of helped her, like, turn it around and get back on tracks. And now she's like a college-age woman, and she's going to school, and she's, got her shit together. Her family attributes that to Mercer. So this is sort of like the closest he has to a healthy relationship. And Jack, how's he put it? I want a piece of that ass, or...
I want a piece. You tell him you never wanted a piece of that? I bet she flirted with you and it pissed you off.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened, which leads them to deciding to kidnap her, which eventually leads to their own downfall. So it's a little ironic with... not a healthy relationship, but the closest thing he has to a healthy relationship with a woman...
Yeah.
...is what it ultimately ends up leading to him getting caught.
Yep.
Gross.
Gross.
Before, we don't have like a section for it, but before we get into Koontz and Kings, I want to talk about the end and how it all goes down, because a big criticism that we've had of Dean Koontz books is that, like, Hollywood, let's get married and run off to Hawaii, kind of get married on the beach kind of ending, which this book does not have that. It has a happy ending in that the bad guys die and are punished for what they do, and it's some amount of the good guys get to live and move on.
Yeah, but you still had, like, one half of the major, or no, he's not a major character, but, like, team member gunned down. The girl's still been brutalized and probably traumatized beyond repair.
Not to mention the 21 girls before her that were raped, killed, and buried in a pigsty.
Yeah, they're all in the pigsty.
So, it's very dour.
Yeah.
I kind of want to say bittersweet, sweet in that she gets rescued and Jane makes it out of there alive, but...
you haven't read any, like, the Hannibal Lecter novels, right?
No.
It really reminds me of them, so...
But yeah, just wanted to point out how different it is from at least the other ones that I've read.
Okay, for my 307th book, this couple is attacked by a lamp monster. Ooh, ooh.
You're not even trying anymore, are you? When can I have it?
Typically we do Kings and Koontz. Kings is your prop, Koontz is your slop, but in honor of Dean this week, we're going to flip it around. Koontz is your prop and King is your slop. So for the Bone Farm, what is your Koontz?
My Koontz is Mama Day. Anytime she was referenced, I was just like, this is amazing. This is the greatest thing I've ever listened to. Mama Day will make us immortal. I want her to be a recurring character in the Koontz cinematic universe.
Maybe she is.
Yeah.
Maybe she is. I don't know. Maybe she shows up in other books. Part of the Koontz multiverse.
Dean, I know you listen to us because of the Simpsons writers listen to us, and you also listen to us. Write a Mama Day book for Daniel,
please. Maybe just a short story.
Yeah.
My Koontz is Mercer and, like, his journal entries and the deep dive into his mind, and the fact that I needed to take a shower after listening to this book, but I like character depth and really getting into one person's head. Okay. Even if it's not a nice place to be. And then your king.
I would say as decent as Jane Hawk was in this, I was far more invested in the quote-unquote villains.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, you get like the Barris, of like background on her.
The best thing we get on her is she's okay with shooting perps.
Yeah. You get a little bit about her parents and her mother being murdered, and but I mean,
which explains why she's so okay with shooting the perps.
But she's not the focus of this book. But I imagined like the series has to be different.
I almost would have preferred it if she would have been the one not okay with shooting the perps,
and then she had to
do it.
Yeah, like her partner was telling her it's okay. Like if you get in a spot where you have to, and then she gets put in that spot. Yeah, that would have been a little more character developmentally, but yeah, it is what it is.
But I guess she's already had her well-rounded journey with her mother and her father, so
yeah. And my king is actually not in this book itself, but adjacent. So
okay,
part of my research of this book led me to looking up the covers of all the Jane Hawk books.
Oh God, how bad are they?
They are the worst, most generic dime store paperback covers I've ever seen in my life.
Let me see. Are these like Wattpad covers?
You'll see.
These are like Wattpad covers. These are like I have self-published a novel and I need a model to put on here. This girl's fine though.
I mean, yeah, she's cute, but I mean, this is just like the most generic book cover crap I've ever seen. Like, I would never, ever pick up this. I know you shouldn't judge a book by the cover, but people do every day. I would never pick this up in a bookstore.
I always tell people that covers are supposed to entice you to pick up the book to give it a try.
And this would not for me.
Those ones are a little better.
Yeah, there's some other covers that I like a lot more.
Still not.
They're not amazing, but they're fine.
The Crooked Staircase is fine.
Yeah. And I do like, so just real quick, the titles for all the books are The Silent Corner, The Whispering Room, The Crooked Staircase, The Forbidden Door, and The Night Window. I like how all those titles are intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like as you go through the titles, like you're exploring a house, and like you go around the Silent Corner, you explore the Whispering Room, you go down the Crooked Staircase and through the Forbidden Door and peer out the Night Window. Like, I like that.
Yeah.
So on to ranking, and you can join our Discord and go to the ranking channel and see our rankings for yourselves. I put this third from the bottom, which is just below The Scarlet Plague and The Hellbound Heart, and just above Nothing But Blackened Teeth in The Confederado. Like I said with The Hellbound Heart, this is ranked pretty low on my list, but that's not because I didn't like it. I think this book is great, and I enjoyed it even more on the second read.
We really only have two things on here we didn't care for.
That's exactly it. Like, I've pretty much loved every book we've read, except for the bottom two. So even though if it's third from the bottom of my list, it's still, like, last in a really good batch of books.
Yeah.
Even though I really enjoyed this book, I can't in good conscience put it over The Stand or Carmilla or Phantoms. Although I would say, comparing it to Phantoms, like, this book doesn't have like any issues in it that bug me.
Yeah.
Like Phantoms does, but Phantom's high points are just so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your list, sir?
Oh, wow. I'm going to put mine right above The Scarlet Plague, so it's going to be fourth from the bottom.
Okay.
I really couldn't put it above Carmilla or The Only Good Indians or The Hellbound Heart, so...
No. I agree. So, homework. What would you do if you found your long-lost twin brother and no one else knew? And I don't think we ever mentioned that. The fact that they kept Jack a secret.
Yeah, they kept him a secret the whole time, and they dressed the same, and...
Yeah. To the point where they could even, like, interact with people and switch places and normal twin stuff.
No one else knew. How is my twin brother's life?
How is it?
Yeah, like, do they have a lot of money, a hot wife?
I don't know. You tell me.
Okay, well, because if they do, I murder them and take their place.
Okay.
If their life's only okay, I pull a Parent Trap and we switch for a minute.
Well, I was going to say that if it's a situation where, like, my brother comes to me and moves in with me, then I teach them my job. And he works a week and I'm off a week. I work a week, he's off a week.
Oh, that'd be great, too.
Yeah, I know, because then it's just like, wow. Or I work 20 hours a week, he works 20 hours a week. Like, that would improve my life by quite a bit.
If I was more attractive, I would do twin porn.
Yeah. Which is apparently a thing.
I think I'm like a solid 6, but I don't think that's good enough to like take another solid 6 and start an OnlyFans.
I mean, I've seen people who are way lower than a 6 in porn, but maybe not twin porn.
Maybe if I could get my 6-pack back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are my answers.
Okay, and then our question for the listeners is, what would you do if you found your long-lost twin and nobody else knew? Reach out to our socials, which you're about to hear. And then for further reading, if you enjoyed Dean Koontz's The Bone Farm, I would recommend Apt Pupil by Stephen King, which is very similar, and a nonfiction piece about a real serial killer. Very good book, The Demon Next Door by Brian Burrow, which is about a serial killer from Texas, where everything's bigger, including the serial killers.
I would recommend Johnny Douglas's Mindhunter, or The Cases That Haunt Us. They are very good serial killer books. I don't recommend a lot of true crime these days anyway. I've come to hate what the genre does to people.
I like true crime, but I'm not steeped in it like a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that eat, sleep, and breathe true crime.
And I don't know if it's true crime's fault, because it was kind of a thing before it became like super popular, like serial killer groupies. Mm-hmm. Like Bundy and Dahmer were getting letters as soon as they were in prison, and that was before all the documentaries and all.
That's gross.
It's just
gross.
Sensationalized, but I just feel like it's made those sort of things a little worse.
Yeah, probably.
And I never know when's an okay time to start writing about true crime events and profiting off of it. But something tells me it shouldn't be when there are still victims actively alive, which keeps happening.
So upcoming on The Horror of Babylon. Next week, last Sunday in November, we are going to be reviewing Hellraiser 2022, wrapping up our Hellraiser coverage. And then the first Sunday in December, we are going to do an episode covering Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. And instead of doing a separate episode on the movie, we're just going to have a segment of that episode devoted to the adaptation. The next week, we are going to do something we've never done before. And we are going to cover a movie without reading the book, because part of our 13 Nights of Halloween giveaway was we gave away an episode and somebody got to pick the movie, and they chose Horns, starring Daniel Radcliffe, which is based on the novel Horns by Joe Hill, son of Stephen King. And we just said, fuck it, we're gonna cover the movie, not read the book, which neither of us have read before. And we might come back and read the book later and then, use that as an experiment to see, like, how it affects our opinions of the movie.
Yeah.
And which happens to me a lot when I see a movie and like it and then read the book and, like, oh, maybe the movie wasn't so good. That has happened to me multiple times. And then December 18th, that Sunday, we are going to be covering Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And then the next Sunday, which is Christmas, we will be covering the 1931 film Frankenstein, which I hear is a very true adaptation of the book. Very super true, like beat for beat the book.
Are we not going to do Thomas Edison's Frankenstein?
What's that?
Thomas Edison made a Frankenstein movie.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he made a silent Frankenstein movie.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's 1910.
It's 16 minutes long. If I can get it, yeah, we'll do it.
We'll just do it together.
Yes, we are also going to cover the Thomas Edison Frankenstein movie.
You're welcome, Ryan.
Okay. Like that, so I can save it? Okay. All right, so we will also be covering that. And we'll just do that, the 1910 and the 1931 in the same episode. Wow. And this is like a full, like, 20 years before the other one.
Yeah.
Have you watched this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just save it. All right. That's going to be exciting. Well, thank you for...
I thought maybe we weren't covering it because you were going to be all like, no, I prefer Tesla, fuck Edison.
I do. I mean, Edison was an asshole who killed an elephant. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to watch his movie. Like, as I tell people all the time, is I try to ignore celebrities' personal lives. If I like their work, I like their work.
I thought he and the elephant were in love.
No.
Oh.
No. Fucker. Killed him. All right, well, thank you for reading The Bone Farm.
The Bone Farm.
I guess you picked our first Dean Koontz book. I picked our second, so be thinking about what you want our next one to be, and we'll try to work it into our schedule somewhere.
Okay. I might make us do Watchers just so we do, like, the big one.
Yeah, and you haven't read Watchers, have you?
Mm-hmm. No. It's been sitting in my backpack for months.
Okay, well, that'll give you an excuse to do it.
I think it has a film adaptation, too.
I think it does, yeah.
I'm just gonna Google that while we're saying our goodbyes.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Stay tuned for our socials and stay scary.
Stay scary, everybody.
And now for the obligatory socials. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow Daniel at @DStarSick on Twitter. Follow Ryan at Darth Damio on the Bluebird app. You can find the podcast on Twitter at HorrorPod69. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Slasher, and Goodreads. Become part of the Disturbed community by asking for the Facebook group and Discord links. Send dick pics to the Horror of Babylon podcast at gmail.com. Support the show at patreon.com/thehorrorofbabylon. In closing, you can let your friends know that The Horror of Babylon is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all other major podcast apps. Stay scary.